Speaker is Tews from the American Enterprise Institute.
So I'm going to put some cost to this. So and you brought up some really good points about, I mean, the tail end where you're like, there's a sense I hadn't thought about, are they paying for silence? I mean, are they just paying to silence people about what what people's opinions in general? So the massive fines and the compliance costs to U.S. companies, and then the damage that it does to the ability for just people around the world to be able to talk are really striking. So the DSA empowers the EU to fine tech companies up to 6% of their global annual turnover, not just EU revenue, which equates to a daily non-compliance penalty of 5% of daily global turnover. So those numbers are real. I mean, those are like, you start to look at these fees and the compliance cost, and you realize it's just easier to let the people that want you to not have as much information online to win, and unless you're paying attention to what's going on. So the U.S. companies are already paying a supervisory fee, so you're paying their regulators, to the European Commission an average of $8 million annually, which is in some cases up to $23 million for some of the bigger tech companies. This is an annual estimated compliance cost to the 5 U.S. tech companies, which are really targeted by this act, of $2.2 billion annually, with a $430 million per firm average. These are not one-time costs, they're reoccurring, they're growing, and they're baked into the operations indefinitely by the regulation. So the DSA requires tech firms to fundamentally have to re-architect what they're doing to comply with the DSA. They have to have a public explanation system for every content removal and account suspension. When I read that in my head, I thought that was just perfectly designed for a Saturday Night Live skit. It's just like saying, okay, you want to do this, we're going to make this really cumbersome. We're going to make you have to explain this verbally to everyone every time, because they're all going to be different. They have to build alternative recommender systems, so they're not going to allow them to pick one way to comply and move forward. There's internal compliance functions that they have to submit annually to independent audits to allow them to be compliant with the DSA, as well as they have to develop a DSA transparency database for advertising and content decisions, which anytime you have to put anything, I mean, I'm a big believer in transparency and accountability for the reasons of, why are you making me do this, versus somebody saying, I'm going to have to tell you every time I make a decision about advertising or a content decision. I'm a free marketer. You get to decide those things as an entity, as what is best for your base, not the government deciding who you should be advertising to. As well as the banning of targeted advertisement for minors. We had a previous conversation about the challenge of just knowing who is a minor these days, and the amount of information you end up amassing and trying to make that what feels in the beginning like an appropriate decision means you're just giving more information to the government than it really should have at hand. Though there's also a lost revenue opportunity on the other side. So beyond direct costs, U.S. tech firms face a severe constraint on monetization. So I realize no one wants to cry for the big tech companies, but this is a digital economy that we're managing. So Meta, Google, and others may lose up to $14.8 billion annually on online revenue, which means they're not putting money into research and development of forward and innovation tech, as well as $18 billion a year in lost revenue for changes that they have to make mandated by the DSA for platform fees, subscriptions, and cloud services as they're reviewed. By 2030, the cumulative revenue loss of DSA-related restrictions could hit $2.2 trillion. So, as I just previously mentioned, this means there's a potential of slowed innovation and delayed feature rollouts, which at first hit the EU, but then we have the challenge of what they call the Brussels effect. So the compliance, where the EU is exporting regulatory standards by default, forcing U.S. companies to follow European norms and make them what is now become the global standard. So you see that there are many companies that have just decided they're going to ban certain things that starts in the EU. By the time they're done with their compliance and their regulatory team, they've just decided to stop doing it, which is taking technology the wrong direction. There are the amount of regulatory tiers and key provisions that are on content moderation, user, information around the limiting and things around alternative recommendations for the user that the company can put forward have to be reviewed by people in Brussels. There's the challenge of systematic risk management that they have to mandate through annual audits, internal compliance, and risk mitigations that have to be reviewed. So that means that you're no longer making decisions as a company. You're making decisions on what is going to make the European Union happy. That is definitely not the permissionless innovation of which we like here in the United States. The costs are real, so that is my key point. The ultimate goal of what you're talking about is the idea of freedom of expression is, like collateral damage in what's going on here. So the money is exceptionally real. What happens is these different mediums, which are migrating. I mean, I'm of an age, we like Facebook, we moved to Instagram. I'm not a Snapchat person. I've never been on TikTok for my own reasons. But, this means that there are certain things that go on that, there's an evolution process here. If this had gone forward in the mid-2000s, we would be stuck with Facebook, because nobody would evolve past that. And we all are looking forward to different ways that we can evolve the way we communicate with each other, however we wish to do that, and the messages that we want to talk about. So I really appreciate that you all have taken the time to get us here today, and I hope this is an ongoing conversation. I was curious because I didn't realize some of the things we were talking about previously about just what's going on in Ireland are very important that they get highlighted. And when the media is not bringing both sides of the equation to light, that means that we're all losing. So thank you. I really appreciate you having me here today.